Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us for our C2C workshop this evening. We have some people in our space here in person. We also have some people joining us via Zoom. So for those of you that are on Zoom, if you have any questions throughout the presentation, feel free to put those into the chat, and we've got someone monitoring the chat who can then relay that question, or you can even do a little hand raise if she sees that. If there's time at the end, we can have you unmute and ask questions as well, if with this small of a group. But definitely go ahead and start putting those in the chat as you come up with questions so that we can be sure to get those answered for you. The Career Development, the Business Career Services Office is putting on our C2C workshops, and so you'll see these throughout kind of some of the Tuesdays here in the spring semester. So check out all the opportunities that are there, as well as the recordings for those that you can find on our website. So we want to make sure that you are taking advantage of those and getting prepared for our events coming up, such as the career fair that we're doing in March and our practice interviewing, all the opportunities that you can take advantage of. So we're really lucky this evening to have a guest to be our speaker for our C2C event. And we have Mr. Steven Neal. He is an alum from the Walker College of Business and Finance and Banking, and has 20 plus years in industry, and then now is doing some consulting and speaking work and working with, sharing his knowledge and information. And we're very glad and lucky that he gets to do that with us this evening. And I know he's got some other introductions to do for himself, so I'm going to let him do that and turn things over to you. Thank you so
very
much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Are you guys comfortable if I remove my mask to speak to you? Okay, perfect. So first of all, thanks for coming out and joining and showing up to hear a little bit about what we'll be talking about this evening. As for the agenda, just a moment.
That's the screen there.
Yeah, you gotta get off of the Zoom.
Okay.
There we go.
Okay. So I'll talk a little bit about just an introduction of myself, who I am, what we're going to talk about, and why it may be relevant for you guys to think about this. And it's really about self-development and thinking about as you're beginning to transition or think about transitioning from college into a career. For some of you, might be a year or two, might be a couple of years. What are some things to anticipate and think about as you're considering ways to develop yourself? So as part of the conversation, we'll talk a little bit about some of the needs that you might face, that I faced and others have faced, some of the resources and skills, and then some different ways of thinking about how to kind of build your approach towards self-development. So a little bit about me. I kind of think in PowerPoint slides and pictures a little bit. So the first one there is a tractor. I've never owned a tractor. I've ridden a tractor, but I grew up in Dallas, North Carolina. Any of you know where Dallas is? I see you shaking your head. What do you know about Dallas? Anything?
Very tiny and a lot of farmland.
Yes, that's very, very tiny, a lot of farmland, straight down 321, hour and a half from here. I grew up in an 800 square foot home across the street from a cow pasture and a strawberry farm. Went to elementary, middle school, and high school with the majority of the folks that I knew my entire young life, and graduated with a class of 105. So not a lot of diversity, not a lot of change that I experienced as a young person. My parents were not college educated, so when I transitioned to Appalachian, I was a first generation college student, and a lot of adjustment there, and a lot of things that I never really thought about until I got on campus. Understanding that I came from a rural small town that was in the middle of a lot of farmland, where when I got to school at App, realized that folks came from all different types of backgrounds. When I came to App through a transfer from a community college, and loved my time at Appalachian. The three things that I took away that were most impactful on my life, and we'll talk a little bit about these as we go through the presentation, were probably number one, my wife. So that was a nice added bonus that I hadn't anticipated early on. My finance degree has served me well in both my professional life, but possibly even more so in my personal life, and several lifelong friends that I met along the way. So app has been a phenomenal resource for me, and I hope that in some small way through things like this, I may be able to return that favor. The third picture, and this is 100% ego satisfying. This was probably one of a handful of made it moments in my career. This is me flying around the country with several of our top executives, solving big, complex business problems that maybe I wasn't ready to be a part of and helping to solve. But 20 years in insurance and building and gaining knowledge and resources along the way allowed me to accomplish and achieve a lot of goals, probably a lot earlier than I had anticipated. And so with that, I've kind of arrived at a place where I'm trying to figure out, for the next 20 or 30 years, how do I use those tools? Do I want to continue to use them in industry, in the financial services industry, which has been phenomenal, or do something different? And so Action Planning Plus is what I'm doing now. Coaching, consulting, speaking, and speaking to folks like you helps me figure out some of those things. So that's a little bit about me. Why talking about some of these topics today might matter to you all. And please, when we have some opportunities to kind of interact, let me know if I'm getting some of this right. And then even afterwards, kind of come up and we can chat a little bit. I think as we're preparing and we're moving through early stages in our lives, that the path is somewhat ready-made for us. We go to school, we go to college, we get a career, and at some point we may or may not decide to start a family. After that, we really have to kind of do some searching and figuring some things out. So hopefully, as part of this conversation, you'll get some thoughts and ideas that maybe you don't use today, but maybe at some point you'll think back and say, you know what, I'm not the only one who's gone through that, and these are things that are worth kind of figuring out. So the first piece is needs and resources, and I'm hopeful that the framework that I've chosen to walk us through this isn't foreign to you guys. So a couple folks in the room, give me a head nod or a hand raise, familiar with this pyramid. These represent just needs that we have as humans, and this hierarchy, as well as I understand it, and I'm not an expert in it, but in order to get to the next level, you have to satisfy the one before it. And they're kind of split between two different types of needs. The lower level needs and the higher level needs, represented by the blue and the red bars. And the lower level needs are sometimes referred to as deficiency needs. And as you look at those, any thoughts on why they might be thought of as deficiency needs? So if you think about food, warmth, rest, safety, security. Other idea? These are most readily felt and seen when they're gone, when they're away. So if we're without warmth, we will feel cold. If we're without food, we'll feel hunger. The higher level needs a little bit different, and we'll talk about those separately as we move through. So focusing on those lower level needs of food, warmth, rest, safety, and security, can you guys think of anything or any types of resources that could help satisfy or meet those lower level or basic needs?
Like what, besides eating? So we need just to satisfy them, like as you said, without warmth to feel cold, so you put on a jacket, rest, go to bed, like don't stay up to 2 a.m. and a video game. So yourself there. Is that what you're sort of asking?
Exactly. So if like I said, if you're hungry, you need food. If you're rest, you need sleep. Safety and security. If you've got some of those other things around you, you probably feel safer and secure. How do you acquire the food and the warmth? What's maybe one resource, if you think of one thing that if you have that one thing, you can get those others?
Money.
Money. Right. And the reason I'm bringing up money here is it's important to think about money in the context of our needs because, and I heard this on Good Morning America this morning. It was a first generation college student speaking about her experience and her ability to excel in academics and achieve a 4-year degree, a master's, and a PhD. And on the back end of that, she had a wealth of knowledge, but she was also saddled with debt. And she chose a career path that wasn't a very high income earning career path. So it's something to think about while we're in our academic setting and preparing for our career, so that as we make those choices and we're thinking about eventually making it to a place where we can focus on and satisfy those higher level needs, we've got to have the basics to support us with just getting the food, having a warm place to be, and getting the rest. And also, when those lowest level needs are satisfied, it allows us more time and energy to focus on building relationships. So helping us kind of move through that stratification of needs as well. An interesting thing about this is it's not only the wealth or the income that we have, it's our expectations about wealth and income as well. So if we've developed for ourselves an expectation that our career path is going to get us there, we're likely to take more risk, we're likely to be able to achieve more because we know that those things are coming. And also our past, if we came from a family who was financially stable, we might feel that we've got that support should we need it, and may even anticipate an inheritance at some point in the future that could help satisfy some of those basic needs. So just covered those. Are there any other aspects around wealth or income in relation to satisfying some of those needs that you can think about besides family, education, career, training?
Looks.
What's that?
Looks.
Looks?
Like for instance, you gotta have a nice suit and everything, trying to look well.
Mm-hmm.
Can't just keep showing up in t-shirt and jeans.
So your appearance, how you show up in your day-to-day life? Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so let's transition over to those higher level needs. So on the lower end, if we're satisfied and we have enough income to meet those basic needs, we're likely in pretty good shape. What about some of these higher level needs? Belonging and love and the relationships beyond the support of close family and friends, a feeling of accomplishment, being able to achieve things in life, to aspire to, it's labeled here self-actualization, but being able to take your thoughts and ideas out into the world and have an impact. What are the types of resources there you think are needed to satisfy those types of needs? Any ideas?
Motivation.
Motivation?
Self-motivation is also.
Yeah. What else?
Knowledge.
Knowledge. What types of skills do you think might be helpful? That's okay, and that's kind of the point. These higher level needs become a little bit more obvious to us, I believe, when we have the safety and security that can be offered to us through income and stability. But once these start to show up in our lives and we're trying to figure out, what types of relationships do I need to be successful in my career or to be more impactful in my community, or I've satisfied my financial goals, but how now do I start to think about showing up and contributing in ways that are beyond just what I'm doing at work, which is very important, but leaving my mark. Those things are a little bit tougher to figure out, and the skills that go along with them are a little less obvious, I think, too. So we'll call this the brain slide, just because it's got the first picture there is a brain, but it's focused primarily on executive functioning skills. And I've got a couple other things that are blended in there. Have you guys ever heard of executive functioning skills? In what context have you heard executive functioning?
Like making sure you're not being stupid with anything. You actually have to think it through. You have to not let your automatic system just be like, oh yes, let's do that. You have to actually think it through.
Yeah. Have you picked this up in classes? How have you?
Over a law class, most recently in a marketing class, that we're reading a book called Nudge.
Okay.
It talks about your automatic system versus your, of course, the word is failing me now. But you thought, the Homer sense of brain versus the thought where you actually have to think it through, like Spock.
Yes, it's a tremendous set of skills. I will share my experience with these. I remember learning a little bit about this, probably in a marketing class, maybe in a sociology or psychology class in college. I thought it was tremendously interesting. And then this did not show up in my life again until I started working in a volunteer capacity with folks who were either recently homeless or on the brink of becoming homeless. So food insecurity and housing insecurity, and the challenges that folks go through and the skills that they have to work through those problems are limited because they're constantly overwhelmed with just how do I solve and meet my basic needs. But these skills are tremendously helpful at a foundational level, because as we've moved through our lives, we continue to run into new challenges and new situations, and being able to fall back onto these is tremendously powerful. The challenge, I think, is once we're out of an academic setting, unless we're proactive, I don't know how these get met. So that's something that I want to confirm and validate as I'm having conversations with folks like you and others is, where are you seeing these? How are you thinking about them? Are you thinking about them at all? And then with different groups, so I'm speaking to a group of college students today, I'm speaking to a group of young professionals next week, and then some high school students in a couple of weeks. It'll be interesting to see how much attention these get. I'll share with you maybe a couple of examples from my life and experience with these. So I shared with you, I grew up in a smaller town. My parents their education was limited. We had a lot of things coming at us, but because of that, we were really reactive. So there were probably two things that, as I reflected on these later in life, that I didn't observe and see were impulse control. So emotions hit, and emotions would hit hard because sometimes we were struggling. And so making snap decisions was a challenge. And then also maybe on the other side of that was self-monitoring. So me and my family were really aware of ourselves and how we fit into different contexts because of our financial situation. And so like I really felt that in college and really in my early career, and wasn't sure exactly how to address it. There's a lot of information available for free and online about executive functioning skills, and you're learning about it now. And there are assessments that you can kind of score yourself to say, hey, which of these am I really strong in, and which are some that I might want to consider developing. And I'd highly suggest, considering that. Interesting too, I think about these is I've got the title of lifelong development opportunity. There's only so much our minds and brains can do for us with these, and especially in a business context, and then in personal life, when challenges really become complex and multifaceted, we might have to reach out for tools or additional frameworks for assistance. And in the professional world, that happens certainly quite a bit. Agile software development, a framework for problem solving and thinking through things. So these aren't or don't have to be wholly within ourselves. We can find tools that can support us when we find that we're reaching our limits. Next couple of things. So in addition to these executive functioning skills that we need to help us work through and satisfy those higher level needs, we've got different domains in our life, and there are certainly more than these, but for simplicity's sake, just think about our personal life, our professional life, and then ourself. You're going to certainly have demands on you to develop your career technical skills, ability to communicate within the framework of the professional environment that you're in, and then networking. And some of these might overlap with some of those executive functioning skills, but certainly the career technical, that's going to be a really specific subject matter expertise that you'll be looking to develop. And then in your personal life, several categories of skills that you're going to need to develop and think through. And then the last one, self-development with physical well-being, mental and emotional. With these three, where do you think folks put the most amount of emphasis? In early, maybe early career, or as you're winding up your college career?
Professionally.
Yeah. Would you agree? Yeah. That was my experience and what I've seen. We live in a Western society where we're built to be productive citizens, to contribute to our economy. And so through our education and in our career, we get a lot of attention put on us to help us develop those skill set. And unless we're pretty passionate and proactive about finding ways to also perform and develop in our personal lives and to work on ourselves, that can be a challenge. I'll share with you that the professional life was the easiest for me to figure out for the reasons we talked about. Some of the most challenging that I didn't anticipate were being a good husband, being a parent, finding my place in my community and how I would contribute and the skills that would go along with that. And I've had to work to come up with a framework that would work for me to help me develop in those ways. But just thinking about these last two slides, the number of skills, the different domains, it can get pretty complicated pretty quickly. And you guys are on the cusp of some pretty big transitions, and we'll go through those in just a moment. So the next part of the discussion is on needs and development over time. So the pyramid and how it plays out in our personal development over time. A couple of things to consider or maybe assume here is, if we take this slide exactly as it is, and we assume or pretend that these peaks and the valleys happen when they do, as presented here, and if we pretend that this is representative of a lifespan of 90 years, so we'd be able to chop this up into thirds. On the surface, where do you think the majority of your self-development might happen?
In your 40s?
In your 40s?
If I'm following that correctly.
Well, these are the needs. So you can start to see the peak intensity of some of the needs from the pyramid starting to show up in different places. Where do you think in your personal development you're acquiring the skills to be ready for these peaks that are showing? Let it out.
So it's, in your professional development, at least, it's right around after the safety needs. That's where professional wise you would be, where all of them sort of come into play.
Mm-hmm.
So you've been in a career, hopefully, this is broken to thirds, around for 20-ish years.
Mm-hmm.
So you've been in the, both probably different jobs or anything, but you've been in the workforce for 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
When everything probably adds up all together in professional development. All that correctly?
I think it's a good way to think about it. And even before that, if you think of give and take, when are others investing a lot in our development? as you think about elementary school, middle school, high school, college, early career, we're kind of getting a lot from our surrounding environment. And then to your point, as we start to transition into maybe that more middle space, we're still developing, but maybe we're not developing on the back of others investing in us. Maybe it becomes a little bit more on us and a little bit more proactive in seeking out how we're going to develop, why we're going to develop, and what direction we're going to take. So I think it's an interesting view, and it might show up a little bit easier here, where if we do chop it into thirds, in that first block, think of that as your 0 to 30, teachers, parents, family, a lot of folks interested in helping us and guide us. And I'm only going to speak really to the first 2 blocks because I've not made it to the third, the third block yet. But that transition between block 1 and 2 is a pretty big transition from relying on others to others relying on us, and really thinking through, how do I start to help a team at work? How do I help my organization? How do I help my family? How do I make those decisions? How do I contribute to my community? And that roadmap can get a little fuzzy and a little bit more difficult to navigate. The one question I didn't maybe get to, because I had 3 that I wanted to make sure that I touched on in this section. The first one was, where do you feel the most time and effort is spent on self-development? I think it's a lifelong journey. I think it's forced and pressed earlier in our life. If we're good stewards of ourselves, and for those around us, it continues for the rest of our life. But I think it becomes a little bit more challenging in that second space. We have to be a bit more proactive. Where do you think life starts to really get complicated?
Block 3.
Block 3? Talk to me about block 3. So that's when you're 60 or older.
So it gets complicated because then you're like, well, because everything changes, because then you can't really be part of an active workforce. I mean, you can still do some stuff, but it's like you're not the 20-something-year-old fresh out of college that people want to hire. And so stuff like, what do you do then?
What if we broaden the view a little bit more than just your professional life? Think about your whole life. Where do things have an opportunity to become more complicated, a little bit more rich, dimensional?
Social Security card.
Well, that's right. So I agree with you. All of those things can show up. I've not lived that, but I can speak to some of the complication that came into my life after college, building a career, moving to new cities and towns, different companies, getting married and living with someone and meshing our values together. My wife and I now have 3 children, so planning for their educations and deciding together how we're going to impart those values with them, with different family members having, so all of those things are starting to converge somewhere, at least in my experience, in that second phase. And for me, I was armed with everything that I had from the earlier phase, which was largely geared toward making me a successful person in my career. So I've had to round that out quite a bit, and I suspect, and I know through observation that others have had those types of challenges as well. Okay, so let's talk about a couple of representative models. These are based on nothing but my experience and me looking back and trying to think about how did I think about development early on, and how have I seen others think about self-development? And when I say self-development, I'm talking about the whole self, personal, professional, how we move through life, how we satisfy the needs, how we acquire the skills we need to be successful. And this was the first representation. And so it's almost as if we think of ourselves as three separate people. I'm going to develop for my professional life. I'm going to do what I have to do to be successful in my personal sphere. And then if I get to it, maybe I'll think about my physical well-being, my mental and emotional health. And remember those executive functioning skills? I haven't thought about those since I was in college or high school. What do you think might be some of the pros to this type of an approach?
So what, are we focusing on professional and personal? So
Well, think of it as maybe being focused on these three separate areas.
Like starting with professional life, the communication and networking can kind of help lead you into communicating with your community or your partner relationships in your personal life. So it's kind of like that word flows.
Okay. Anything else you can think of? What might be some of the downsides of this? So thinking of your kind of cutting your life into slivers.
trying to find the balance between the three. That's always I can see a downside of, instead of focusing on just one, if you're focusing on three, it's always trying to find the balance between, well, I would like to keep working at work, we'd like to get promotion, but also this big community barbecue's happening. So I've decided between those two. What's the balance that you do?
I think that's probably what most folks would say, and I'll share with you. It was and still is every day. The challenge is, how do you find balance? And I had a slide in here, and I took it out, and I might put it back, but it had this happy guy standing on a seesaw, and it was perfectly balanced, and it had work and life, and he was big and smiling. And then the picture beside it was a guy on a unicycle juggling. And you know that something's going to fall. Hopefully it's not him, but that's probably more reflective of the lives that we build and lead for ourselves. But I think this might be the way that most folks, or at least a lot of folks, think about it. And some of the challenges can be, if these three selves aren't highly aligned, trying to become someone in one area that's not the same in the other can become overwhelming, and it's just not sustainable. So the second way, again, based on nothing but my prior experiences and observations and trying to figure out, looking back, what the heck did I do? So I started my personal and professional development, much like what we just looked at, but over time it's migrated to feel and look a lot more like this, where I've realized that there's only one of me to do it all. And I have to make choices about that. And I'm better at making those choices when I can put things in context. I can think about my professional life. I can think about my personal life, my professional life, how I want to show up in my community, and then start to think about what are the skills I need to develop to help me achieve the needs that are going to make me feel better about myself, better about the contributions I'm making in the world, with my family and with my career, and then making choices about which of those I want to take on. Whereas in the other model, it was almost always the professional life won. And I was focused on developing those skills, and then shifting to this type of framework and mindset helped to identify areas where to strike more balance and to not get overwhelmed. If I could find a couple of things that would work well for me in multiple domains, then that's just a huge win. It's efficient, it's effective, and it feels good. And so these certainly aren't complete. And when I work with clients in a coaching setting, I never put anything like this in front of them, but I do try to help them find things that work for them in multiple spaces so that they get the most out of their investment in themselves. A couple of things on here that that I will highlight: executive functioning skills we've talked about. I think they're tremendously powerful, and it's a way to just kind of check in with yourself. Otherwise, you might be thinking, where can I develop? What do I need? How do I do it? It at least gives you a framework and some words to wrap around some of the skills to develop. Financial wellness. I was able to satisfy my need through getting a finance degree, but I don't know how others do that and do it well who don't have that formal education. So figuring out how to run a household, plan for the future, get to your retirement number, get your kids to where they can have everything they need to be successful and go to college. I think it's just a skill that's underserved. We see groups like Junior Achievement that try to help with some of that, but once you're out of school, you're on your own there, and unless you're able to find resources to help you develop those skills for yourself. And then parenting and partnering. Unless you came from a family who did it really well and it was modeled for you, that's something that you've got to figure out for yourself. And the executive functioning skills we talked about, a lot of those will go a long way in your personal life to help you regulate emotions, not be impulsive, to think about the best approach. So these are certainly not things you're having to deal with now, but who knows when those things will shape and come into your life after college. So far, we've talked about needs. We've talked about some of the resources. So financially, if you've got enough income, the lower level needs become less of a challenge. The higher level needs, the resources there are executive functioning skills, and then the skills that are specific to some of the areas of your life. What do you think is missing from a model like this as you're thinking about self-development? Is there anything that's glaring from your point of view? No? Okay, just checking in.
I can't think of anything that's missing.
Yeah, well, and maybe some of that is you'll experience it in the next several years and then it'll pop up. But so far, I've put this in front of a couple of groups, and it seems to be fairly representative of some of the challenges and the mindset, and just shifting from the three separate selves to a holistic view of self-development. Okay. And how are we? All right, so we're going to have, I think, plenty of time to go into some of the examples, and then we'll do just questions and conversations probably around the 45-minute mark. So these are some skill development examples I've pulled from my past, and I've seen some others do similar things. I shared with you, first generation college student, lower income, money was something that was important to me to figure out. I was able to satisfy that with my degree in finance and banking. I certainly use that professionally. So the point is, if we learn something in one area of our life for use there, we can use it in other areas as well. Planning and prioritizing. I'm curious, in a college setting, are you guys picking up on any techniques or frameworks that help you with planning and prioritizing your days, your calendar, your events, your activities, your social life? How are you guys developing those skills today? Personally?
With some help, like hearing about what other people are doing is helping a little bit. Like I do each class's own separate calendar on Google Calendar now. Instead of just putting all under my calendar and label it differently, they're all automatically color coded like that and separate, if that makes sense. So that's just personal stuff that I've all put together.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's probably how most folks do it. Look around, see if someone's doing something that might work for ourselves. I did the same thing, particularly early in my career, but I recall even in this setting, when I was a student, I had a good friend. Her family was a small business owner. They were small business owners, and she was just always super organized and prepared. Calendar, journal, activities, and I was just wondering, like, how does she know how to do that? And I found out it was because of she was exposed to it. I really didn't start to pick those skills up until I got into the professional setting. And again, to your point, looking around and seeing what was working for others. But there came a point where I had to reach out and really kind of ask for help. And I found it through project management. I was never a formal project manager, but had an opportunity to work closely with project managers. I've led a lot of projects, but that hasn't been my job role. But learning their tips and tricks and techniques in the professional setting helped me in my career. But I also used that skill set when we had an investment property. I was able to project manage all of the construction work and kind of do all of those things. And I wouldn't have been able to do that had I not acquired that skill in the professional setting. So that was an interesting opportunity. From an organization standpoint, this is kind of similar to prioritizing and planning, but before I had the opportunity to get deep into the project management and the skill set that went along with that, I just picked up a book that was called Getting Things Done. It was by an author named David Alum, and he had just a framework, a methodology for managing emails, managing notes that you take, if you take it in class or if you take it at work and it's in paper form, what do you do with it when it's done? And then capturing information through email and other sources. But I had to seek that out. There was no class that was available that gave that. And then I don't know if you guys have heard of Lean or Six Sigma. Is there still a class at App that's production and operations management? Something similar? Okay. I took the certification course, the 40 hours of training, used it in professional life, but it's been phenomenal in my personal life as well, and just simplifying some of the ways that my wife and I go about our daily lives. So really focusing on the things that drive value and not doing some of those other activities. But again, it was a professional skill or talent that we were able to use personally. The most surprising skill that I've developed has been mindfulness. And it's something that I picked up in my personal life after my third child was born, and we were living 800 miles away from our closest family and friends, and my career was demanding. I was in that jet flying around the country. I needed time for myself to just be aware of what was happening and why, what was driving either frustration or anxiety, so that I could choose and not be impulsive on how to respond rather than reacting. Tremendous benefit in personal life, equally so in my professional life, and I would have never thought it, but was fortunate enough to stumble across mindfulness. And then the last is just problem solving and decision-making frameworks. So talking about complexity, when we were looking at those waves in that middle section, and it rang true with me, layering on family, career, a couple of moves to different states, trying to think through a multitude of challenges and planning for retirement, and just everything that comes along with trying to be a good contributor, a good employee, a good father, a good husband. I needed more tools, and so I participated in a 2-year program that was focused on strategic decisions. Certainly helped me. My employer funded it. Used it daily in my professional life, but bringing that into my personal life was huge. So being able to really break down big problems and get to actionable steps I don't know if I would have ever been able to develop that type of skill set on my own, or even reaching out to family or friends, even those now that are well educated and have more experiences. So I think the point here is be mindful, be aware of the opportunities that sit around you. Even today, you know, you're learning and preparing for career and gaining skills that are useful for you as you're navigating campus life. But with a little bit of forethought and just anticipation of what's to come, you can look for ways to develop some of these other skills and areas. Any examples from your collegiate life that you've found, you've taken a class, you've learned something, and you thought, that's interesting, but I could also use that in my personal life? Or the other way around?
I mean, sort of just some like peer classes where it's like, oh, that's a neat trick.
Mhm.
You know, I wouldn't say it's a full-on skill, but it's just like a little tidbit that you learned.
Yeah. The one that I remember and still use the most was just in one of my early basic finance classes, just time value of money, present values and future values. You know, I suspect 80–90% of the population has no idea how to do that, but that is a tremendous tool that, you know, we get taught to do in our professional lives, that in our personal lives is equally as powerful.
One thing for taking advantage of things on the campus, there are definitely opportunities through like our Student Success Center to do some executive coaching, skill building, mindfulness. You know, we have a couple different opportunities there as well. Things that happen on the campus. So taking advantage of some of those things can really feed into some of the skill sets that you're talking about.
Yeah, that's tremendous. It may have been around when I was a student, but it feels like there's a lot more awareness around mindfulness, a lot more awareness around, I've mentioned first generation college students, just the diversity in different ways, much more progress in a lot of those areas. So I'll close on these couple of thoughts. The lower level needs, our wealth, our expectations of wealth really matter there. I think it matters to folks in this room and on the line, as far as you know, thinking about the career that you're going to go into and how that's going to support you in satisfying your needs based on your situation. The higher level needs, consider executive functioning skills if you haven't, and if you don't do it now, keep it in the back of your mind. At some point in time, you might hit a roadblock and say, wow, what is that? It at least gives you the language and a way to think about some areas for development. And then to optimize your self-development, think about, you know, not yourself as three separate and distinct people doing three separate and distinct things, but, you know, where are the areas of development that can impact multiple areas of your life and drive value for you. And then the last thing is just, you know, don't wait, start now and be flexible. I've shared with you, you know, these frameworks, these thoughts, these ideas in a week. And even after today's conversation, my thoughts are going to change. The more I interact with people who have different experiences, it's going to inform my thinking. But start thinking about it. Even if you think it's too soon, just being aware and starting to think about, you know, the next 5 years, maybe not the next 60, but the next 3, maybe not the next 90 and retiring and kind of getting all the way down the path, but thinking a step or two ahead will help you think about the skills you can develop today to be prepared for when you get there. Okay. I think that's all for the formal presentation. I'm happy to hang out and field some questions if there are any.
Are on Zoom and want to put a question in the chat or even just unmute and ask, welcome to do that.
Mm-hmm.
What did you say that book was called? Is it Getting It Done by?
Getting Things Done by David Alum. So I'll give you a short burst of resources that you might find interesting. So Getting Things Done, I think there's a revised version of it. The older one talks about Lotus Notes and some things that would have no relevance, but I think he's updated it. It's pretty cool. For mindfulness, in addition to things that are going on campus, the UCLA Marx Center is a phenomenal resource. I trust them because it's an academic institution, and I've participated in some of their events since 2016. I follow their guided meditations, it's easy, quick app, and I've gotten to know them. For executive functioning, I'm so happy to hear that there's a resource here. And I might send it, if I send it to you, could we put it in maybe the presentation?
Yeah.
Okay. There is an adapted self-assessment that you can take. So executive functioning, as I've experienced it, has largely been focused on maybe folks that are on the spectrum or have some type of learning challenge or opportunity. But they've taken the assessment and they've adapted it just to say, hey, what does it look like? So I'll send a link to that. But yeah, Getting Things Done, 2013 was when I implemented that for myself, and that was pretty powerful. Yeah, good question. Okay.
I'm curious if you've seen, as you've gone through your career, and then of course things have happened maybe even more rapidly recently, but if companies seem to be more supportive in some of these areas so that it's not three separate kinds of things, professional, personal, or how students maybe should make choices or decisions around kind of what's important for them with work world choices, where they're going to go based on that.
Is that a culture question? Maybe?
Yeah, kind of culture.
Culture matters a tremendous amount. I can speak to it based on my experience. My experience has largely been with large corporate cultures, but even with large corporate cultures, I've been in those that were more progressive and more conservative. And I say that not politically, but in how they think about employee development. And so I don't know if I have an answer, but I think it's something that, based on your needs, so thinking about where you are on that pyramid, the skills that you think you might need, understanding that corporate culture is going to be tremendously important. Because I'll just share an experience that I had. I was excited about learning, getting things done around learning lean practices, even when I didn't necessarily at that point need them in my career, but I was filling gaps. I didn't know exactly what those gaps were. I wasn't thinking executive functioning skills, but I was like, I know that there's something missing, and that looks like it could solve it for me. The response I got was, why? Why would you do that? And I'm like, I don't quite yet know, but I know that it's going to go somewhere. You can, what is it, the Steve Jobs quote, you can connect the dots looking back, not going forward. I was in the connecting, kind of going forward mode, but that culture piece is very important.
Yeah. Recommendations for financial wellness, like outside of just the finance degree, like besides just general research?
That's a tough one. I kind of geek out. I bought the full stack of financial planner textbooks, and just like I'm because it was such a need for me. I wish I could advocate. I'm a fan of doing as much as you can on your own and pulling in experts when you need them for two reasons. One, you build the knowledge, so you know what questions to ask, and you can check the provider a little bit. And two, for me, it's just a matter of control. I want to be close to things that are really important to me. I've not found a great resource. I've got tools that I've built that help me, and I use with some others. I think the advice that I would give would be to assess your own ability there, and then fill the gaps. But do it. Be proactive about it. I've seen some folks that just lay off their money, and they kind of hope for the best, or they don't think about it and hope for the best. It's a risky strategy. Yeah. Anything else? Okay, I'll stick around if anyone wants to chat afterwards, be happy to. And thank you all for coming out and listening today.
Thank you for your time.
Yeah,
We
thank you.
appreciate it.